paper, I will discuss documents from Jerusalem Holy Cross Monastery, also the fresco of Shota Rustaveli's inscription found there, and certain accounts about him. My study was associated with different consideration of this source. I tried to dissect from each other reality and legend. In certain accounts about the biography of Shota Rustaveli, it's very difficult to make difference indeed between the legend and reality. And I think that it's necessary to do that, and this is main topic of my presentation. In the first talk about the fresco and inscription, on southwestern column there is a fresco, quite small one, of Shota Rustaveli. It's depicted a nobleman in a very rich dress. He is in an old position before the Saint Maxime confessor and Damascene, John Damascene, and those frescoes are larger ones, 3 meters in height. Those saints are depicted in full height, and the nobleman is depicted in a very small, at a small scale. This nobleman is very richly dressed with ermine on his shoulders. He has a hat on his head that is also richly decorated. It can be noticed that the cloth is very rich with red roms of tracery and decorated with pearls. And so this individual is in a position of thesis or of a prayer before those two saints. According to Akaki Shanidze, who had read the inscription, we can learn the following. This was painted by Shota, and Lord have mercy upon him. And under the inscription is another inscription, Rustaveli. And also there is another reading, Lord have mercy upon Shota. At the top they used to read Shota, and at the bottom Rustaveli. All inscriptions are executed in one hand in the same time. Georgi Arabuli considers that maybe the words can be understood in a bit different way, but I consider that version suggested by Akaki Shanidze is the best solution. Inscription comprises two parts. The first is that he has committed paintings in the church. In the second part of the inscription, from the second part, we learn that he is Rustaveli, or Bishop of Rustavi. And it should be the Shota Rustaveli who had donated money for decoration of Holy Cross Monastery. And he had donated money for that. According to legends in scholarship, it was accepted that the poet in his life went to Jerusalem and was tonsured monk there and was buried there. It cannot be approved documentally. On the other hand, he is seen in this fresco dressed in nobleman's dress and not in monk's dress. We can also underline that if the nobleman Rustaveli wanted to donate money to Holy Cross Monastery, the decoration. He could do that immediately from Georgia. It wasn't necessary for him to leave Georgia and to visit Jerusalem. So, therefore, the consideration that Shota Rustaveli had visited Jerusalem is just a consideration, just a supposition. There are no documentary accounts about it. Well, and for interpretation of this inscription and fresco, we will use Timotei Gabashvili's accounts in 1757, 1758. He traveled to Near East. He visited or pilgrimed to Georgian monasteries in Jerusalem. And when visiting Holy Cross Monastery, he mentions the monastery is in a shabby way, and probably the same was the case in the 12th century, and Shota Rustaveli had made donation for reconstruction of this church and for making paintings on its wall. Despite the fact that this information is very short, it gives us very interesting accounts. The first, that Shota Rustaveli's fresco is in the Holy Cross Monastery, that he is in elderly age there, and that he's occupied the special position that he's something like the treasurer in modern understanding. That Shota Rustaveli has renovated the columns of the main church and have made the paintings. So there the columns are mentioned, several columns are mentioned, and Timotei Gabashvili considers restorator of the Holy Cross Monastery. And fifth, important is the fact that in his idea, individual in fresco is the person who had told some evil poem because he considers that Shota Rustaveli's poem wasn't of good origin. Alexandre Baramidze considered that Gabashvili wouldn't have attributed anything good without having this information from any oral or written sources. And the question arises, from where did Timotei Gabashvili receive these accounts? Especially this concerns information about the position of Shota Rustaveli, because it was Timotei Gabashvili that Rustaveli occupied the position of the main treasury of the royal court. This means that probably Timotei Gabashvili had certain account. On the other hand, the fact is that this information was earlier unknown from other sources. The next account about links of Shota Rustaveli with the Holy Cross Monastery is attributed to Prince Tamar Bagrationi, though he hadn't visited Jerusalem, but it's very important his consideration that Shota Rustaveli have pilgrimed to Jerusalem, and he had donated money to it, and that he had died as a nobleman and not as a monk, and was buried in the monastery. So, again, she is repeated, she just cites what Teimuraz Bagrationi writes. She has already mentioned this, that he died there and he was buried as a civic person and not as a monk. Here are some interesting data. In the first place, Shota Rustaveli pilgrimed to Jerusalem and stayed in Holy Cross Monastery. He renovated the monastery and he stayed there till his death. And fourth, that Shota Rustaveli was a civic individual and he is buried in Holy Cross Monastery in Big Church. This is first written account about the fact that Shota Rustaveli was an tonsured monk in the monastery, and another account is that he is depicted on a column, and another is the fact that in Teimuraz Bagration's lifetime this fresco was still visible. Timotei Gabashvili doesn't mention anything about details of Shota Rustaveli's life in Holy Cross, and not about location or existence of his grave in the Holy Cross. In 19th century, this fresco was seen by Chubinashvili, Alexandre Tsagareli, and the issue of the grave were touched upon by Zakaria Chichenadze, Kultateladze, Alexandre Tsagareli. Next, Mose Janashvili wrote a special monograph on this issue. In 1893, the Jerusalem Holy Cross Monastery was visited by priest Peter Konchoshvili and Nikomar, who was visiting the Holy Cross Monastery. He didn't find this fresco because it was overpainted. Among the Greek monks existed a legend about existence of Rustaveli's grave within the big church of Holy Cross. And in 1960, certain team from Poland visited the Holy Cross Monastery, and they decorated with flowers the possible grave of his enemy. They decorated with these flowers the column on which, according to the Greek monks earlier, was seen the fresco of Rustaveli. And this event generated and necessitated to launch expedition of Georgian scholars to Holy Cross Monastery, and in 1960s Georgian scholars visited it. They cleaned the fresco and they took the first photos of it and brought it back to Georgia. It was also established that because of invasions on the part of Muslims, this fresco was decorated several times or renovated several times, though despite of renovation the inscription was never changed, and therefore its content should be that was comprised in the initial inscription. And members of these teams didn't give exact consideration about was Shota Rustaveli buried in Holy Cross Monastery or not, because they didn't succeed in finding any accounts about it. Later on, many different considerations were written and published, for instance by Shalva, Nutsubidze, Amiranashvili, Itzhak David, and others wrote on this issue. Quite different consideration was expressed by Paule Ingorogla. The next very interesting is the following issue. Is Shota Rustaveli's grave in the monastery? For this, several problems should be solved. First of all, it should be found out, had ever Shota Rustaveli pilgrimed to Jerusalem? We have no accounts. Was he tonsured monk? We also have no accounts. If he was in the monastery, to which hierarchy did he belong, or did he remain the civic individual? So the Georgian scholars, certain Georgian scholars are are towards one consideration and others to another. And on the other hand, we can state that being a civic person without tonsure as a monk, probably Shota Rustaveli wouldn't have had any opportunity to stay for such a long time and to live in the monastery. Anyway, this issue should be studied. On the other hand, of importance are accounts about his post of the main treasurer. Actually, it is found in Synodicon of the Holy Cross Monastery that was published by Helen Metreveli. According to the inscription, Shota Rustaveli had restored the Holy Cross Monastery, but as treasurer, he had made certain donation and his name had been introduced in the Synodicon of the Holy Cross Monastery. Another question or issue arises. When Shota Rustaveli was appointed the main treasurer, there are diverse considerations about this issue. And very last studies mention that probably that because the Jagelis and Torelis used to be in this post, there was only one file gap when it was possibility to Shota Rustaveli to occupy this post till 1189. And certain scholars consider that he occupied the post only during the reign of Queen Tamar, because Georgi, Lasha Georgi, who ascended the throne after death of Queen Tamar, he decided to renovate all the court and all these positions. I should finally mention that in the poem Vepristrausani, we can see certain elements from the life of Shota Rustaveli, and I also consider that probably he remained in the post of the treasurer even in the times of Lasha Georgi. Well, several interesting accounts have been revealed for the biography for Shota Rustaveli, but we should make difference between real documentary sources like inscription found on the fresco and in Synodicon records, and between some legendary tales. These legends, of course, will be remained as a folk tale, and we cannot state that these legends can be realized as reality until we find some documentary sources or accounts about pilgrimage of Shota Rustaveli to Holy Cross Monastery. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Thank you for keeping the time. I know it's not easy, but really thank you. We
have heard about the biography of Rustaveli and his life in Jerusalem, and we return to the translation and the influences of Hebrew sources, as we heard in the first one about the biblical source, and now about